This one I'm purchasing myself. I'm purchasing it directly for the benefit of my family. I'm going to turn this property into a Section 8. I'm going to be local here as well. Like this is the name of the game. I want to buy a bunch of rentals. I think rentals are the future. As far as all of that goes for my personal business. So the money I make off of my flips, the money I make in my wholesale business, I reroute all of that through different tax advantage strategies and get that back into real estate buy and holds. And this property I purchased creatively, and part of that process for the seller to have the basically this is her requirement. She wanted the trust in general. We presented options. Her choice was to do it this way. This is a VA loan. Obviously, we're not going to share specifics. We're not going to share. I have two cameras here, so we're not going to share specifics. We're not, all of that will be redacted effectively. I'm not going to give you out any of that information for the protection of the seller. However, the process is a legal transaction referred to as subject to, right? This is actually referred more specifically as a hybrid because there's a seller carryback, also known as seller financing, on the back end piece, right? Where this seller came to me, basically said that, well, in the beginning, one of the best ways to describe this is she was very resistant at first to the due on sale clause, right? Because she's very literal, and you can hear me talk about that with other things. Is on the phone she comes across cold. In reality, she's calculated and she's nervous, and this is something she's never heard of, and so she was very resistant. Naturally, as any logical person would be, if something you've never been taught or understood, right? So as we go through the process, I introduced her to a great set of TCs. Caleb Christopher's team over with Creative TC is fantastic. They have a very hands-on approach. You can reach them anytime. You can go to creativetc.io. Consider this a commercial. I don't get paid by them, but I use them for every purchase that I make, creatively at least. Cash purchases, you can understand that. We'll go over some of that with content as well. Those are pretty straightforward, even novations, now that you understand the schematics. Once you understand the paperwork, that's the way it goes. That's actually the original reason why I joined any of the mentorships, is because I just wanted the contracts. My background working at the city, I have done hundreds of contracts, and I have worked with armies of lawyers and independent people, different funding streams, lenders on all kinds of different stuff. So from that experience, that's what I needed, was the contract. I need the black and white so I can see where I can operate in the gray, or where because that's basically the schematic, right? The United States tax code was not written for the individual; it was written for the small business. So you have to understand the rules, and you can win the game. That's what we're here to learn: is what are the rules of the game, so that we can put our money up and play with the casino's money. Because that's what I'm doing. Because I started a wholesale company. A lot of people think that if you start a wholesale company, it's just going to be rags to riches, right? You just be, oh yeah, if I put $10,000 in this mentorship, I'm going to be rich. You still have a lot of shit to do. You have to learn, you have to educate yourself, you have to do the work. And when you're an entrepreneur, there's no one cracking the whip behind you unless you have things like I do, which are goals, aspirations. Like, trust me, I didn't just leave the city of Fort Worth on a whim, right? It was plotted. It was a decision of my family, and we discussed that together. And when that happened, it happened for good reason. So anyway, so what we're going to do today is more education, right? So I've worked in, 20 of the 50 states, and the no two documents are the same for the most part. So everybody tries to get a national contract, and the reality is sometimes you got to use state contracts. This one here is a different process. It's a trust. So the title, the deed is going to be transferred over to a trust that the seller is going to set up, and they're going to sell me the beneficial interest in that trust, and that's how we're going to make our agreement. So the way we got there, and that's the protection. Can you protect against the due on sale forever? No. Anybody that tells you that you can do away with the chance of a due on sale 100% is just lying to you. There's always a chance, but what are the things that we put in place to help protect against that type of situation, for the benefit of the seller, for the benefit of the buyer, to protect that deal? Because any buyer of one of these is in it for a healthy amount of cash. Just because you're selling their mortgage to them does not mean that they're not in it for a healthy amount of cash. I mean, investors, putting up 50K, I don't know an investor that's like 50K doesn't matter to me, right? That's a big deal. Anyway, so you have the protection there, is that we're financially invested, but the benefit on the other end is that you are protected legally, right? The contract is ironclad. It's done with experts through the entire way. Everything's done through title and escrow. Highly recommend everybody review contracts. That's what we were just talking about with this seller, is that she needs an extra day, and I already know that because I've dealt with this. And as we talked about on some other videos, this is like the 30th or 40th touch point with this seller. This is a relationship thing. You don't own a wholesale company, you own a marketing company. And to market, you need relationships. And that's the reality, especially when you're doing any kind of dispo or even when you're doing complex deals like a subject to or a hybrid. So anyway, so let's go over this though. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to present my screen. We're going to go to this document that got kicked back over to me. So this is why you let experts do expert work, is because we're paying what some would refer to as a high price for this transaction coordination company. They do the things that you need them to do, right? They are experts. Now, are they attorneys? No, they'll tell you that. They're not attorneys, they're not CPAs, they're not accountants, tax attorneys, none of that stuff. But what they are friends to investors, right? Their entire business model is wrapped around what investors do, right? And everybody that has bought a house is an investor, though you don't feel like it. It's one of the biggest financial decisions that most people make in their lifetime, if not a couple of times in their lifetime, right? And so when you're dealing with the equity in your home, you want to make sure it's done properly. And that's the big piece that Brad and I are working on for Unrepresented, is letting people know that you can do this by yourself. But the reality is it still costs time, money, or resources in general. So where do you put your resource? As an entrepreneur, we exchange our time for money, right? Or money for time, rather. And so as an entrepreneur, we exchange our money for time, right? So I need my time back so I can focus on larger issues such as raising capital, the flips that are currently going on, where the leads are coming in to feed the team to make sure that the conversion rates are still what they need to be. And so to get my time back so I can focus on working on the business instead of working in the business, I farm that out, so to speak. But through the last 3-4 years of working with creative transaction coordinators, I have landed on literally the best one that I have found. They pick up every time you call. They have direct guidance. They can, if they don't know the answer, they're going to go and get it for you. And that's exactly what they do over there. So does it cost $2,000? Hell yeah. And for damn good reason, right? This is not easy shit. Like when I called Caleb, he went and researched everything to do with lease options in Texas and helped me understand things. Is he a lawyer? Hell no. And he says that. But he put in the equity as a client, right? Because he takes care of that. And he's there to, just like we are, to protect the seller and the buyer. And there's not every wholesaler can say that. Most of them are out for a paycheck. I'm out for stress-free, guilt-free, I can sleep at night money, right? I want to put the sweat equity into the relationship, add the value to the transaction that's necessary to justify the ends, right? And I haven't had a single seller, or even buyer rather, complain about any of the money that I've made. And I've made healthy checks, folks. So, that's just from doing good business. And that's what this is. It's doing my due diligence and not just relying on my transaction coordinator to understand and levy it out. I still have to put in the equity. I just do this at my leisure, right? That's the big difference that we're talking about here, is I get to do this at my leisure. So what is this document? What am I doing here, right? So what we're doing to protect this, and this is a VA loan as well, we're putting this into a land trust. Why are we doing that? Well, there's specific guidance from the VA that protects against when a mortgage is transferred into a land trust and yada yada. There's also the St. Germain's Act. There's all these other things that we can go into at a future rate. Does it protect you from the due on sale? It is a barrier. I wouldn't say that it protects you, because nothing is like it. There's protection would say that there's no risk. There's always risk. But does it add barriers and make it more difficult? It can, right? But there's always legislation coming out, and there's always a risk of that. So how do we protect our seller? Well, first, this is the first line of defense. We're going to put this into a land trust. And that's the protection from the St. Germain's Act, and also guidance from the VA about land trusts specifically, right, or agreements for sale. So why did they do this? Well, it was through their own research, right? Because this seller is unlike most sellers. Most sellers are pretty ignorant when it comes to this, and ignorant with the true definition of the word. And I don't mean any insult from this. It's the lack of knowledge, right? So ignorance in that true sense. And that's a rational ignorance. In political science, they talk about this. Economics, they talk about this, that as a democratic republic, and I'm not to get into politics here, but as that piece, it's an elected republic, that it's irrational to accept or believe that every person can know everything about every candidate in every election and everything, right? It's irrational. So we have an elected person that we elect to do all of those things for us. And it's kind of the same thing here, is I elect to have transaction coordinators do this for me and review most of this stuff, but then I send this also to my attorney for them to review and make sure that I'm protected on all avenues. I have worked with Caleb and his team recently for the last couple of months, and we've done, I don't think at this time, 4 or 5 transactions, but they do about 60 a month. And I've seen Caleb Christopher and our mentorships moving for a long time, and I just like the way it moves. But all of that to say, this isn't like a giant ad post for that, but this is where it came from. So how did I get here? I paid a bunch of money for experts to do expert things. And then this is what was kicked out through the terms that I negotiated fairly and above board. And actually, most of this is recorded between the seller and I, right? And through that process, this is basically how it shakes out. So is this a full deal review? I can give you some boiler points, right? So this one was kind of hard to comp just because Zillow doesn't have it. 5517. Again, so here we are. As far as that goes, just to give you rough numbers, I've already comped this property, and as far as comps go, it's about 345 is about what this house is worth with increased square footage. The fact that it was built in 2022, it's a 4.3, and it's absolutely stunning. This woman and her family lived in this, and as she said, was light lived in, or something to that effect, or light living. And I'm like, it was the opposite of that. I mean, it's immaculate. And so when I walk through a property like that, I see a 3% interest rate. I'm like, hell yeah, how can I make this happen? Well, the first order of business was getting, the conversation over the due on sale, get the report built, get the trust in, and get the right people in the room to talk about the important matters like if, why, when, how, right? And so at that point we get here and we negotiate the terms, right? So I went above the purchase price, right? So if she were to sell this house and fight the market because she understands what it's worth and she knows it's a sale, she'd have to fight the market like everybody else, right? And show the house a million times, pay a realtor a bunch of money. And that was a big piece for her. She did not want to pay a realtor any money. She had bad experiences over and over, and she ended up just selling them herself. So she's very resourceful as far as sellers go. I would say she's probably in the 5 percentile, top 95th percentile of all sellers that I've met. As far as education, intellect, being able to understand things, she's very, very intelligent. That said, going through that, this also makes it difficult for specific things. A lot of people are a little easier to go along with this stuff. They understand they're in tougher spots. So once again, this one was not something that was towards pain. Everybody else looks at it that way. I see it as what's in it for me, right? And I look at it from their perspective too, and I don't fight them too much. And so I said, as long as you can wait on that equity, I have no problem writing that up. And so what does that mean? It means that she was comfortable now. Let's get to the good stuff. She's comfortable now with the sub 2. So what does that mean? I'm going to take over the mortgage. But what does that mean? The mortgage is actually going to stay in her name. And I'm either going to log in and pay that mortgage, or I'm going to use the loan servicing operator to log into that mortgage for her, but draw my account every month. There's a process there. We can go into it another time. But depends on how that shakes out. But and then there's also the HOA payment, and there's insurance, and there's all that fun stuff. So we have to get all of that stuff done, and that's what Creative TC does. They give us a bunch of quotes. We have to still strike. We have to pay the premium and all that fun stuff. But that's a part of our closing costs. It's a part of our underwriting of making sure that this is a deal that works for us. So she's got 3% interest rate and is selling to us subject to the existing mortgage. Built 2022, so it's a new mortgage. Naturally, it was built in 2022, but a really, really good interest rate. And but there is equity in the property, and there are improvements, and then they have it in perfect condition. So it's if she fought it, she could maybe get it, but she'd still have to eat her equity one way or the other, right? And so her point was, I want to be done with this. I'm moving soon. So if that's a pain point, which it is that that's where the urgency comes in. So she's motivated to sell because she's moving, right? But the urgency is she had no urgency. She could have stayed there forever. She wasn't hurting on money. She just sold 2 other homes cash. Right, but this one had a mortgage on it. She couldn't get her money back, and so she's more worried about her number than price motivated more than any other seller pretty much that I've ever met. Right, so she doesn't care about anything other than getting her number. And so we arranged terms to where I would not, because she didn't need money and I needed cash flow, and the long-term rents aren't really what they need to be, and that's a backup plan. We have other plans, but we always want to do good business to make sure that when we go into this contract, we can always perform. And I explained that to her. I said I need it to float, at least float, or be right below floating. A couple $100 maybe negative cash flow. I can source that while the market fluctuates as it stabilizes or whatever the case is. So if we do hit rough sales, then we have an out. So from that entire process, we got down to the nitty gritty, and here we are at the trust. So I'm just going to go over this pretty quickly and get into it. So name of the trust. What is the difference of a trustee? What is the difference of the beneficiary? Rough, very, very rudimentary understanding here. It can't be the same thing. And correct me if I'm wrong here. If you have a trust attorney and you want to refer me, go ahead. But they can't be the same thing. So what are we doing? We're using an LLC as the trustee, and then we're naming our individual selves as the beneficiaries. And what does that mean? It means that Hugh will remain a beneficiary, but a 0% beneficiary, right? So that she is actually part owner of the trust, and she has her name on the trust, and the title is in the trust name. So there's that due on sale kind of protection there, and we can get into that another time. But in the name of that, it makes it really easy to deed the property back too, because it's in the land trust, and that mirrors the exact terms of our agreement, which is a hybrid. So we have a sub 2 portion, then we have a seller finance portion. But here's the kicker: is for all that extra equity that I'm giving her $25,000 down, because she wants skin in the game, and she's going to keep that money off to the side in case I screw up. Right? That's almost her exact words. I love the contingency plan. Again, she's going towards gain, not away from pain, not as much away from pain, more towards gain. So it made perfect sense, right? So I'm bringing $25K to the table. House is worth $345. I'm purchasing for $360 total. There's about a $38,000 seller finance portion to that, but it's 0% financing, 0 payments for 10 years, folks. And that's because I explained to her, I ran the numbers, because I can do this, and I can educate but also illustrate at the same time with real numbers to people that can get to that level of a conversation, which she required, right? And explain to her and ask her the questions: would you mind if we made a deal that makes sense for both of us? Because this is what I'm looking at, and I really want to do this, and I want to solve this problem. You've talked to people about me, you know I'm vetted. I'm committed to do this. I've already spent $1,000 on an attorney before we're even under contract to get a contract for us to sign. Now we have a new contract. Now I've already spent $2,000 here and $2,000 for the DOS guard on top of it, which you guys can check out from Creative TC. So I'm committed at this point, right? And I have $2,000 non-refundable riding on this as well. Right, we close this week. So, I'm committed at this point. So what's the next steps? And this is it, right? So the transfers over into the trust. We're buying the beneficial interest of that trust, myself, my partner, Brian Garcia, my partner, Andrew LeBlanc, right? So from that, and that's direct income to our families. That's what we want, is cash flow again. And that's part of building our inventory. So the cool thing about being a wholesaler is that when you get to the next level, when you can scale to a point or get lucky enough to hit a $207,000 assignment like I've done before, right? Double close, but we'll get into that some other time. With that there, you can now invest into other properties and